Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you're doing well and your fasting is going well. So last time we covered the Makharij of the Huroof, the exits, the articulation of the letters, where they come out from. I'm going to go back to quickly review some of what we talked about and finish up that topic, and inshallah move on to the characteristics of the letters. So we talked quickly that there's 5 different areas where scholars said that the letters come out from. And as I was showing in this screen here, we said there's area number 1, which is al-halq. There's number 2, which is both this 1 and 2 right here. Together, they make the al-jawf in Arabic, which means the chamber, the emptiness, the space in the throat and in the mouth makes al-jawf. There's the tongue. And we said that 18 out of the 29 letters come from positioning the tongue in specific ways, right? And there's the lips and the nose. Now, when we talked about al-jawf, or the empty chamber that we have between our throat and our mouth, we said that there's 3 letters, the alif, the waw, and the ya, only as med, when they're used as med letters, right? Not as regular wa, woo, we. Not with fatha, dhamma, or kasra. It's whenever they have sukoon and the previous letters to them have a accent that goes well with their nature. So if it's a waw, then the waw has to be preceded by a letter that has a dhamma, right? So that in order to be extended by it, as for example, boo, or do, or su. The ya, in order to extend the letter before it has to have a kasra, such as, C, B, T, etc. The alif, qala, wabala, amrihi. So all these letters have to be in that way. I'm showing here a screen that I don't think I showed last time. So this is how the tongue will look like when we're pronouncing the med. The tongue, when we say qala, so if you try to say qala with me, qala, qala, you're gonna see that the tongue is lowered in this location. Qala, so it's laying down. This is the where the tongue should be when you're pronouncing the alif. Okay, qala. If you say yaqu, yaqu, yaqulu, when you're extending with the waw, you're gonna feel that the back of your tongue is raising up, just like as this line is showing here. So if you say yaqulu, say with me, yaqulu, yaqulu. So you should be feeling your tongue raising up in the back. Qila, when you say the extension with ya, it's actually in the middle of your mouth that the tongue is raising up. Qila, qila. Si'at, si'at. If you say with me, of course, all the time, say all these things with me. So I'm not the only one saying them. The whole purpose, as we said, all this is to make you feel exactly each letter where it's coming from, every sound, so that you are definitely sure you're pronouncing it correctly. That's the whole purpose of these lessons. Also, last time I talked about the letters coming out from the lips. I missed one letter because I was planning to add something to it, which is the letter meme. And the reason why I wanted to add it later and I forgot it in my previous session is that meme comes out from the end sound will come out from your nose. Why? Because of course, when we say ma, what happens? We close our lips, right? So when we close our lips, the air comes here and doesn't have anywhere to come out from. So it has to be rerouted and it comes out fully from our nose. And that's one of two letters that we said that fully use the nose as their exit sound, right? So ma is a letter that is controlled from the lips, but the sound comes out from the nose. So there's 4 letters that comes out of the lips: the ma, fa, wa, and ba. Today we're going to talk about 6 new letters we haven't discussed before. They're the 6 letters that come out of the throat, the deepest of which are the 2, the hamza and the ha. And they come out right maybe from the back of like this area right here. Ha, ha. So maybe if you put your hand lightly on your throat and you try to pronounce them. Now for the ha, I've always said before, like make sure you bring a lot of air from your chest, but it's not the chest that is making the sound. I'm just making sure that you understand there has to be a lot of air coming out, because the ha, you're not really blocking a lot. You're just making sure the air is rubbing against this area here, so that when it's coming out, it's making that sound. So the air is coming out and rubbing against your front throat here. Right? And it should be easy because all of us, I mean, we speak English, so we say he and who and hat and all these examples. So that letter should be known, but we're diving deep into, you know, the details, and we're really studying every letter exactly where it is and feeling it. Next to ha, there's a, right? A, u, e, a, u, e. Also, these are the 2 deepest letters from the throat. If we go up to the very close to the tonsils, okay, now I removed my tonsils. I don't know who did from you too, but around that area, that's where the if you go back and forth between those 2, is higher than a. So you have to move higher and you have to pressure on it. And ha. Ha is a very harsh letter, okay? It's not like ha. Ha is smoother. Ha, you have to pressure and make sure you tighten your muscles right up there so that the sound comes out correctly. Ha, hu, hi. And finally, when we go up, all the way up here, then there's the ra, and a little above the ra even is the kha, as if you're scratching your upper throat there. Kha. So these are the 6 letters that come out of the throat. So we've talked about the the letters that come out of the space in our throat and mouth. We've talked about the lips. Now we've covered the throat. We've covered before, we've covered the letters that are coming out of the tongue. I added this area to show that when we say the na, it also comes out of the nose, right? If we say n, if you say with me, n, and then you close the nose, n, see how the letter is interrupted, right? The sound is interrupted, and it completely dies out. Why? Because the sound is coming out of our nose. The same reason why m, there's no way you can pronounce m, right? Because you close the lips, so the whole thing is coming out of your nose. When you raise your tongue to pronounce the noon, n, your tongue is actually blocking the airway from coming out from your mouth and doing a similar thing that the meme does, and the air comes out of the nose. The other letters do not do that, right? For example, L, you still can say L as long as you want, right? I moved this a little higher because I thought it wasn't too accurate. I had it lower last time, so I think it has to be this place here to be more accurate, the qaf. And remember that the difference between qa and the kha we talked about, because some people have some difficulty differentiating between them, or at least when they pronounce them, they mix them up. Qa, in the qa, as we're showing here, it's a letter pronounced through the tongue. So the tongue comes back up and pushes right in this area, right here against this area. So the tongue is doing something. The tongue goes up and pushes against this area. The kha is just the air going up and bouncing off this area. No tongue usage, right? That's why it was only in the throat screen. We showed it here in the throat screen. There's no tongue. It's not used. The tongue is not used. Okay, so now we know all the exits of the letters. Now we're gonna move on to the characteristics of the letters. We know where each letter comes from, but to really know exactly how every letter is and be sure that we are pronouncing it correctly, we're going to use the characteristics of the letters. And where did we get these, by the way? So all this that I'm sharing with you has all been written down by our scholars from the 1st century. What they did is that they sat down and they, tasted the Arabic language, and they tasted every letter and listened to it carefully and wanted to make sure it's preserved, especially as we said that they saw so many non-Arabs, embracing Islam, and they wanted to help them master pronouncing the Quran exactly the way the Prophet ﷺ used to say it and read it, recite it. So they took the time, may Allah be pleased with them, to put all the details for every letter so that people like us, centuries afterwards, can go back and be able to recreate the same sounds that the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba used to make. So they divided the characteristics into 2 different types. One is called characteristics with opposites. الصفات التي لها ضد. Okay, that's one group, and the other group is called الصفات التي لا ضد لها, which means characteristics without opposites. What does that mean? In simple English, the way I would like to explain it is the group to the left, I'll consider it to be our dimensions, okay? Every letter of the alphabet has to be located within this realm, within this world of 4 dimensions. It's like, you know, when we talk about dimensions here, you know, I don't know if you remember when we went to school, XYZ, the dimensions or 3 dimensions that we live in. We have 4 dimensions to be able to indicate a letter, to pinpoint a letter. And in addition to those 4 dimensions, our list to the right is just saying extra attributes that some letters also have, but not all of them. On the left side, it's either you're gonna have the characteristic that is in red, or you're gonna be having its opposite characteristic, which is shown in green. Okay, so that's why we said it's characteristics with their opposites. So it's either gonna be al-jahr or al-hams. And we're gonna start talking about these today, and we'll talk about those. So salam, somebody saying, I can barely see the right side column. Possibly light in it. Okay, yes, so I know you can barely see the right side column. I did it on purpose because I don't want to talk about it today. So I want to focus on the left side, and I don't want you to pay attention to the right side. Inshallah, next class we'll have the right side lit up so that you can actually read it. Okay, is that okay? Give me a thumbs up just so you're okay with that. Okay. Yes, okay. So on the left side, what we're gonna talk about today are these 4 dimensions, like we said. One is the first characteristic with their opposites is called al-jahr and al-hams. What is al-jahr and al-hams? And before I keep going, I don't want you to freak out because there's so much information, and I don't want you to be thinking you need to memorize all these things. The whole purpose at the end is just to help us be more certain of ourselves that when you are pronouncing a letter, you say, yes, I am pronouncing it right, because I know I'm fulfilling all these characteristics that Brother Marwan taught me about. I am doing it. It's good. So I'm confident. I'm confident I'm pronouncing it correctly. So it's not about memorizing these things. It's just telling you how you're going to be able to pronounce the letter at the end of the day. So just follow, relax, don't write notes. Anyways, as usual, this session is being recorded, and also I'll share everything with you at the end. But just listen, and hopefully you're enjoying what you're learning. So the first characteristic is called al-jahr and al-hams, and what this is about, it's about an-nafas, which means our breath. So the scholars paid attention to our breath while we are pronouncing the letters. If we are releasing a lot of breath, if a lot of breath is coming out of our mouth when we are pronouncing a letter, then we say that this letter has the characteristic of al-hams. Al-hams. There's a lot of air coming out of our mouth when we are pronouncing it. Its opposite would be al-jahr, which means there's barely any air coming out of our mouth when we pronounce it. Okay? So example. So these are all the letters put together. They say they put them together in a sentence. Sakata fahathahu shakhsun. These are the letters of al-hams. These, every letter here, the sin, the kaf, the ta, fa, ha, tha, ha, sheen, kha, and sad. Each one of them is a letter of hams, which means they release air. And we're gonna do that together today. What I wanted to do, for example, is let's say the letter sa, sin. Let's say s, but it's the best way to figure out the characteristic or characteristics of a letter is to listen to it when it's in sukoon, when it's silent, okay? All the characteristics are always there, even when there's fatha, kasra, dhamma, but the best, they're mostly apparent and obvious when they're in the silent mode, okay? So we're only gonna mainly focus on the silent mode. So let's say S, and I want you to put your hand around your mouth like this and feel if there's air coming out, right? S, S, and you should be feeling that there is air coming out. So give me a thumbs up or raise your hand if you feel it, right? S, because if you're not feeling it, that means you are not pronouncing it correctly. S, okay, good. Ek, ek, you say ek, and you release, right? This is how you pronounce ek, ek, and you release air, ek. The sound stops, but the air keeps going, ek. And when you release the air, there's a lot of air that comes out. At, the sound stops, but the way to pronounce with sukoon is at. There's release of air, at. Probably the best out of them is the letter F. F. That is very obvious, right? F. Ah. F. Ah. Ash. Ach. And else. Else. So these are all the letters. I just wanted to make sure you pronounce two letters correctly because sometimes people don't know how to pronounce these letters with sukoon. Make sure you can pronounce ak that way, right? Ak with the release of air at the end of it. And at, when you say at, you're releasing air from between your upper teeth. At, because you say at, how do you say the ta? You put your tongue, the tip of your tongue on your at, on your inside of your upper teeth, right? At, and then what you do is you move your tongue down a little bit, and then you release some air from between the upper teeth. At. Okay, so everybody's okay with this? Everybody can hear me and is okay with that? Give me a thumbs up, please. Okay, yes, more. I just need two more to make sure that at least we have, okay, majority. Good, okay. Alhamdulillah. So these are all the letters that release what? Breath, nafas, okay? And that's why they're called al-hams. How many there are? We said there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We can count them, 10 letters, right? So how many is left? 29 minus 10 is 19. 19 letters are gonna all fall in the al-jahr. Al-jahr, which means barely any breath comes out when we pronounce them. And I'm gonna give you one example. The qaf, for example. If we say aqqa, aqqa, aqqa. If you actually even put your almost all your hand, aqqa, you barely feel the air coming out, right? Aqqa. It doesn't really come out of your mouth. You're blocking your mouth, right? N, N. So all these letters, they don't release air. Second characteristics that the scholars use for us. Ash-shidda versus ar-rakhawa. Okay, ash-shidda versus ar-rakhawa. What is this? So this is about the sound. And you have to be very careful because the first one is about the breath, the nafas. The second one is about the sound, salt. Is the salt, is the sound flowing with the letter when we're pronouncing it? It can flow long for a long time, or is it a letter that when we pronounce it with sukoon, it flows very short time? Okay, and there's actually a third in between al-bayniyya, which means that there are a bunch of letters that are between ash-shidda and ar-rakhawa. So they're not too shadid and not too rikhwa. So ash-shidda are the letters that do not let the sound extend after you pronounce it. For example, let's start, and those are the red here, shown here. So let's start with the hamza. You say, for example, right? Does the sound keep going? It doesn't keep going. The hamza blocks you right there, right? Because when we say the sukoon, the shidda are the letters that when we push on their exits, they block the sound completely almost. So for example, I'm going to give you a total opposite of that. One of the huruf al-rikhwa, for example, is as, right? That sound keeps coming. As, that's the sound. We also learned the S also has the breath coming, right? That's two different things, the breath and the sound, but you can hear it as the sound keeps coming. So that's totally opposite of the sound is cut off. Another example of ash-shidda, or the letters that are shadid, shadida, edge, 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 edge. So that's stopped, right? It's stopped. Versus ash, sheen keeps going. Ash. The third letter is ed. Ed. Make sure you're saying it with me. Ed. Ed. So when we're saying these letters in sukoon, as you can see, they're all short, very short sound. They can't last. Ed. But if I said F, F, that sound keeps going. F. Aqqa. We talked about that before. Aqqa. 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 Atto. Atto. All of them are because when you push, you can't really have the sound keep going, right? Atto. Ab. Ab. Ak. Ak. Notice here, ak. It releases breath because that's what we heard from before. Ak. There's the k at the end of it, but the sound of ka, ak, that's it. It's very short, right? So ak, ak, it's barely, the sound is right here, ak, and then the breath comes as k, ak. So that's also one of the ahruf al-shidda, ak. The previous letters, aqqa, for example, it's aq, and it's only the qalqala, which we're going to study later, that's given the qa. sound. So it's not even its own sound, it's the vibration or the echo. So the letter is really ak. If you push on that exit, ak, it should really stop. No sound should come out. Ak, al, al. If you really push on the exits, that's how the letters that are shadida act out. You push on their exits, no sound will come out. And finally, at. There's air that comes out, but no sound. At. So these are the letters that are shadida. They are in red because they match with the red in shidda. There are 5 letters that are between shadid and rakhwa. They are not like those letters so tough. They won't allow any sound to keep going, but they're not as flexible as ash or s or f. And those 5 letters are lin umar, the lam, the noon, the ain, the meme, and the ra. Al, an, a, am, ar. So they can extend the sound. The sound does actually flow a little bit. It's definitely way better than those red letters, right? But they do not extend as long as the ash. So for example, al, this is how long it took. Al versus ash. The sound of ash is really long. And this is where, when before one of the previous classes, I was telling you that the letters in the fatha, kasra, dhamma situation, they are all the same length. They take the same length of time when we're reading, reciting the Quran. But once we get to the sukoon, they're different. And this is the rule, this is the characteristic that actually differentiate between them on how long you spend on the sukoon for every letter. On the letters that are red, the ajid qattin bakat, and on these one, then you spend very little time because they're very shadid. They don't allow the sound to keep going. So you spend little time. And plus those letters also usually match with the same time with the characteristic in number 1 of the letters that don't also release much air, most of them. As for the ones that are rakhu, that are very like ash, s. So when you have a sheen or seen, for example, that have a sukoon, you have to spend time on it, okay? And you give it its right. You cannot give the sheen with sukoon the same amount of time as a hamza with sukoon. The sheen with sukoon has to be longer. So for example, we say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. You say ashhadu, ashhadu. You know, give it its time to say the whole sound of the sheen. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Versus you would say alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. See how much time we spent on the meme. The meme has also sukoon. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. We spent time, but it wasn't like ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, right? The sheen was longer. And total opposite is the other ones, right? Iqra, iqra bismi rabb, iqra, iqra, iqra. That's the shortest out of them. So that gives us the time difference in sukoon. The third characteristic is al-itbaq versus al-infitah. And al-itbaq, what it is when our tongue is almost all is covering the entire upper area of our like the upper palate, if you want to call it. I'm not too good in the biology of the mouth, but the upper ceiling of your mouth, right? So when the letter is making your tongue go up and almost covering the entire ceiling, either pushing against it or very close to covering the majority of that area, then they call this a letter that has the characteristics of itbaq. And itbaq means, like, you know, closing completely. Itbaq, closing completely. So the letter that has itbaq is a letter that has either closed completely the ceiling of the mouth or is very close to do that. And they said that there's 4 letters only that have that. The saw. So I want you to say else, else, else. And you should feel that your tongue is upwards. It doesn't close everything up. It doesn't, but it's the majority of the ceiling is being closed. There's just a little bit of an area for the air to come out of to give you the sod sound, right? Else. There's the l. So that definitely close up that area. Alpo. The ta probably is the strongest out of all of them because it slams it really. And then there's the alv. That is a little 1 degree probably less than the ta, of course, but it's there, right? So that's the 3rd characteristic. And the 4th and last one from those is the al-ista'la and al-istifal. And al-ista'la is what it is when we make our back of the tongue go up. Okay, that's what al-ista'la means. And istifal is when you don't do that. It's the opposite. So you don't really do that. So all the letters that I'm showing in red, and there's the ra and la in yellow, because sometimes they do that and sometimes they don't. For example, the la, I'll take the la. We said sometimes la, most of the time, is la, but we said in the name of Allah, law. If you say law, say law, and feel how the back of your tongue rose up versus la. Say la, law, la, law, la, law, la, law, right? You should be feeling, if you keep saying it and you pay attention to your tongue, you would feel that la, this is the tongue, it's going up to hit the ceiling when you're pronouncing the normal way, la, and then when you say law, suddenly also this side goes up. And that's what happens with all the heavy letters. We'll talk about heaviness later. We probably heard about the heavy letters before. So else, alto, elv, and when this is heavy, it becomes l, and this l when it's heavy only. So they're in yellow because they're not always like that. So we'll stop here for today and we'll go for the questions, inshallah.